I'm writing this at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday because sleep won't come. And because if I don't put this somewhere, I'm afraid it will calcify inside me and turn into something ugly. I love my husband. That's the part people don't understand. And maybe the part I don't understand either. We've been married a long time. Long enough that our arguments have grooves worn into them. Long enough that our silences know exactly how to hurt us. We stayed together for the kids. That part is true, but it's not the whole truth. The truth is messier, heavier, and harder to say out loud. I don't like who I became in this marriage. When I met my husband, I was loud. Not obnoxious loud, just present. I laughed with my whole body. I talked with my hands. I had opinions, and I didn't apologize for them before I even finished the sentence. My husband loved that about me. He used to say I made rooms brighter just by walking into them. He was steady, grounded, the kind of man who paid bills early and remembered to get the oil changed before the light came on. We were young, and the difference between us felt complementary instead of dangerous. Marriage happened quickly. Kids followed faster than we planned. Life didn't explode. It compressed. Somewhere between the second child and the third, we'll talk about it later, I started shrinking. Not because my husband told me to. That's important. He never said, be smaller. He never raised a hand. He never insulted me outright. It was subtler than that. Death by 1,000 adjustments. If I got excited about something, he'd say, you're overthinking it. If I was upset, he'd say, you're too emotional. If I pushed back, he'd sigh. This long, patient sigh that made me feel like a child throwing a tantrum. So I learned to soften my reactions, to choose my battles, to swallow words mid-sentence because I could already predict how the conversation would end. The kids needed stability. That became the unspoken mantra. Stability meant routines. Routines meant predictability. Predictability meant me sanding down the edges of myself until nothing sharp remained. On the outside, we looked solid. Neighbors complimented us. Family told us we were doing it right. My husband was a good father, a reliable provider, a man who showed up. I was a good wife. I cooked. I organized. I remembered birthdays and school forms, and which kid hated which vegetables this month. I smiled in photos. Inside, I felt like I was slowly being erased. The first moment I noticed how far gone I was came during a stupid argument about paint. We were repainting the living room. My husband wanted beige. I wanted a soft green. Nothing dramatic, just green. He looked at the sample and said, that's too much. Too much. For a wall. I felt something snap. Not loudly, not cleanly, just a quiet fracture. I heard myself say, okay, beige is fine. And then I went to the bathroom and cried silently, sitting on the edge of the tub, because I couldn't remember the last time I'd fought for something that was just mine. That scared me more than the argument would have. I want to be clear. My husband wasn't a villain. That's what made it so confusing. He loved me in the ways he knew how. He worked hard. He came home every night. He didn't cheat. He didn't disappear. But love isn't just about presence, it's about space. And over the years, I had learned to take up less and less of it. I stopped calling friends because coordinating schedules felt exhausting. I stopped talking about my dreams because they felt impractical. I stopped writing, something I used to love, because my husband once joked that it was cute. I still thought I'd do something with it. Cute. Like a hobby. Like a phase I should have outgrown. I laughed when he said it. I always laughed. That's the version of myself I started to hate. The one who laughed to keep the peace. The one who anticipated everyone else's needs but couldn't articulate her own. The one who felt invisible and complicit at the same time. The kids changed everything and nothing. We told ourselves we were staying for them, and maybe we were. But kids are perceptive in ways that scare you. They don't need to hear arguments to sense tension. They don't need slammed doors to know something is wrong. Our oldest once asked me, out of nowhere, why don't you talk a lot anymore? I didn't have an answer. That night, I looked at my husband across the dinner table and realized we were both performing roles we no longer recognized. He was the calm, reasonable one. I was the agreeable, accommodating one. Together, we were functional and empty. I still loved him. That was the cruel part. Love didn't vanish. It just coexisted with resentment. The breaking point didn't come in a dramatic explosion. It came in a whisper. My husband forgot our anniversary. Not entirely. He remembered the day, just not the weight of it. He sent a text. "Happy anniversary. Long day. We'll celebrate this weekend." Something inside me went cold. That weekend never came. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just started pulling away in small, invisible ways. Sleeping earlier, talking less, existing parallel to him instead of with him. He noticed eventually. Of course he did. One night after the kids were asleep, he asked, "Are you unhappy?" I stared at him for a long time, because the easy answer was yes. The true answer was complicated. "I don't like who I am anymore," I said. He looked confused, hurt, defensive. "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything and nothing." I tried to explain how I felt like I'd disappeared, how I missed myself, how I loved him but felt like I was suffocating. He listened, really listened, but I could see it in his eyes, this fear that sounded like accusation, as if my unhappiness meant he had failed. "I thought we were okay," he said quietly. That was the problem. Okay had become the ceiling. For months after that conversation, things were tense, not explosive, taut, like a wire pulled too tight. We tried therapy, we talked in circles. My husband kept asking, "What do you want me to do?" And I kept answering, "I don't know," because the truth was terrifying. I wasn't sure this marriage could contain the person I wanted to become. And yet, the idea of leaving felt unbearable, not just because of the kids, though they mattered deeply, but because I didn't want to lose my husband. I wanted us, just not at the cost of myself. I hated the version of me that felt trapped and powerless. I hated that I had allowed it. I hated that loving someone had turned into self-abandonment. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a school play, our youngest forgot her lines, froze on stage. The room held its breath. I watched my husband lean forward, smiling, nodding encouragement. I watched myself do the same. She took a breath and spoke, loud, clear, imperfect. The room applauded. I felt tears prick my eyes, not because of pride, but because something clicked. I didn't want my daughter to grow up thinking love meant shrinking. I didn't want my sons to think calm meant silence. That night, I told my husband I needed to change, even if it scared him. "I'm not asking for a divorce," I said, "but I can't keep disappearing." He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "I didn't know you were fading." That was the first time he took responsibility without defending himself. We're still married. We're still raising our kids together. We're still figuring it out. Some days are hopeful. Some days are heavy. I'm louder now, not always comfortable loud, but honest loud. I say no. I disagree. I write again. My husband struggles sometimes. Old habits don't die easily. Neither do old fears. But he's trying, and so am I. I still love my husband deeply. That never stopped. But now I love myself enough to refuse to vanish. And if this marriage survives, and I think it might, it won't be because we stayed together for the kids. It will be because we finally learned how to make room for two whole people instead of one shadow and one spotlight. If you're reading this and you feel yourself shrinking, please hear me. Love should not require erasure. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't leaving. It's demanding to exist